They say money can't buy love, but what if it could buy your freedom? What if the price of compassion was a signature on a contract you didn't understand until it was too late? Ethan Miller never believed in fate. He believed in survival. Yet one rain-soaked night in Westford, desperation led him to a door that would change everything. Behind it stood a woman who promised hope, but offered something far more dangerous, a chance to rewrite his destiny through silence. Most people think tragedy destroys you. The truth, it transforms you. The richest lessons in humanity often hide in the ugliest choices, the ones that force us to see who we really are when love and fear collide. Ethan's story isn't about greed or guilt, it's about transformation, about how even the most haunted hearts can find forgiveness in the unlikeliest of places. So if you've ever felt trapped by your past, if you've ever wished for a second chance, listen closely. This isn't just a tale of marriage and mystery, it's a story about connection, about the power of empathy to turn wounds into wisdom. Because sometimes the greatest inspiration doesn't come from victory, but from the courage to choose kindness when the world gives you every reason not to. In the rain-soaked town of Westford, where the streets hummed with memory and regret, Ethan Miller walked with the kind of silence that hides a storm beneath it. The rain had become his companion, steady, predictable, almost compassionate in its persistence. He was 24, tired of chasing hope that seemed to dissolve each time he reached for it. His debts had swallowed his dreams whole, leaving only the echo of what once was ambition. Then came Clara Whitmore, poised, elegant, and impossibly distant, as if love itself had abandoned her doorstep long ago. Her voice carried both the weight of tragedy and the soft rhythm of inspiration. "Marry me," she said, her words calm as the rain, "and I'll give you your freedom." Ethan laughed at first, not out of humor, but disbelief. Who proposes such a thing to a stranger? Yet as she spoke, there was a kind of strange kindness in her offer, twisted though it was. Clara didn't promise happiness, she promised relief, a mercy that only those drowning in debt could understand. He saw something in her eyes then, a loneliness so deep it almost felt familiar. Humanity, after all, is built upon shared ache. He told himself it was a business transaction, a contract of necessity, but deep down he knew that no paper could ever define the connection he felt, growing between two people trapped by life in different ways. Their marriage unfolded under grey skies, as though even the heavens refused to celebrate. The ceremony was small, just a handful of witnesses who looked as uneasy as the couple themselves. Clara's hand trembled slightly as she spoke her vows, and Ethan noticed the way she flinched whenever the word forever was mentioned. There was no orchestra, no laughter, only the silence between each breath. It wasn't a union of love, but of resignation. Yet, in that very moment, forgiveness seemed to hover in the air, unspoken, but waiting, as though the act of binding two broken souls was itself a form of healing. When Ethan crossed the threshold of the Whitmore estate, he felt as though he'd stepped inside a memory that refused to fade. The walls whispered secrets in tones only empathy could hear. The portraits gazed down with eyes too lifelike, too knowing. Every object carried a story, a piano that hadn't been played in years, books filled with annotations in sign language, perhaps messages left for someone who could no longer read words aloud. The staff moved with quiet urgency, avoiding his gaze, as if inclusion had long been exiled from this place. And amid that heavy atmosphere, Ethan felt something stirring, not just fear, but transformation. A shift so subtle that only hope could sense it. He began to realize that some contracts were never about law or ink. They were about souls seeking redemption. Clara S. Mansion wasn't just a home. It was a mausoleum of emotions left unburied, and now he was part of it. At night, when the rain tapped gently against the windows, Ethan would lie awake, wondering what ghosts whispered in Clara's dreams. Somewhere between duty and love, between compassion and survival, he understood that every human heart carries its own haunted clauses. And though he didn't yet know it, the true price of this contract was still waiting to be revealed, one secret at a time. The rain had a way of finding him, gentle at first, then relentless, as if trying to cleanse something deeper than skin. Daniel Cole walked toward the Harlow estate under its grey curtain, thinking only of the contract he had signed, the fragile hope it carried. Vivian Harlow had offered him salvation, and he had accepted, but he didn't yet know that salvation in her world came at the cost of silence. She stood waiting at the door when he arrived, her silhouette framed by candlelight, her eyes unreadable. "You look cold," she murmured, her tone a strange blend of kindness and command. He nodded, unsure if it was warmth or warning he felt in her presence. In that moment, the world outside ceased to matter. He had stepped into a story written long before his time. The mansion was vast, too vast for one woman. Its walls hummed with old memories, its corridors carrying whispers that sounded eerily like sighs. Chandeliers flickered as he passed, shadows stretching across the floor like hands reaching for closure. The staff avoided his gaze, speaking in murmurs, their faces pale, as if compassion itself had been outlawed within those walls. In the study, Daniel found a portrait of a young man who resembled him. The signature read, "Arthur Cole, 1913. "He was my father's enemy," Vivian said softly from behind him, her voice breaking the silence like fragile glass. "Your family took everything. I thought the bloodline had ended." Daniel turned, startled by her calm. "Then why marry me?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Because I no longer believe in revenge, only in memory, and what it teaches." Yet her words were not the whole truth. Over the weeks, Daniel began to feel the mansion breathing, alive, aware, almost sentient. He found rooms that appeared one night and vanished the next. In one, a piano sat covered in dust. When he touched its keys, it played by itself. In another, he found journals, pages filled with cryptic notes and sketches of hands, gestures resembling sign language, drawn beside words like atonement and forgiveness. Some pages were signed with the initials VH, others with EC, the same as his mother's maiden name. The discovery unsettled him, not just because of what it meant, but because he began to feel that strange pull again, that aching connection between love and danger, between past and present. Humanity, he thought, was cursed to repeat what it refuses to understand. Late one night he found Vivian in the music room, seated before the piano, her fingers moving through the air in rhythmic silence. "Who are you playing for?" he asked. Her eyes glistened. "For those who can't listen anymore," she replied, still tracing invisible melodies. "For those I silenced." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Do you believe in transformation, Daniel? In the idea that people can change, even after destroying everything they loved?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Only if they choose compassion over fear." She smiled sadly. "Fear is all I've ever known." The candlelight flickered between them, shadows dancing like ghosts of forgiveness, unspoken. He wanted to reach for her, to break the barrier of centuries between them, but the air was thick with something sacred and doomed, a love that was never meant to bloom. The letters came next, hundreds of them, hidden beneath the floorboards of her study. They chronicled the downfall of two families, one seeking wealth, the other redemption. Vivian's father had ruined Daniel's grandfather, or perhaps the other way around. Each letter contradicted the last, blurring the lines between villain and victim. Compassion battled rage on every page. And yet, amid the accusations, Daniel found something unexpected, notes of longing, of tenderness, of two souls who loved across betrayal. The final letter ended with a plea, "Let the future be free of our silence." It was unsigned, but Daniel recognized the handwriting. It was his mother's. Suddenly everything fit and broke apart at once. His marriage was not coincidence. It was continuation, a chain of pain disguised as destiny. When he confronted Vivian, her composure shattered. "You think I didn't know?" she cried, her voice trembling like the storm outside. "Every night I tried to hate you, Daniel. But you look at me with empathy, and I see him. I see the man who left me with ghosts." Tears slipped down her cheeks, the facade finally cracking. He stepped closer. "Then let it end here. Let forgiveness do what revenge never could." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, softly, "Forgiveness is a luxury for the living." The candles around them flickered violently, and the house groaned as if responding. It was as though the walls themselves could no longer bear the weight of unspoken truth. That night, Daniel dreamed of the ocean swallowing the mansion whole, a vision of release or perhaps prophecy. When he awoke, Vivian was gone, leaving only her diary open on the bed beside him. On the last page, she had written, "I found peace in his eyes, but not in mine. Silence was my curse. May he speak where I could not." Beneath the words was a sketch, two hands intertwined, one forming the sign language for hope. Daniel closed the book gently, tears tracing his face. He realized then that some debts can be repaid in money or time, only through the quiet courage to break the cycle. And as dawn broke over the cliffs, he whispered into the empty air, "I forgive you." The house was still, for the first time, truly still. But something unseen had awakened, something that would lead him to the next chapter, where truth would no longer hide behind silence. The mansion that once echoed with ghosts now stood in perfect silence. Ethan Miller lingered at its threshold one last time, the sea wind brushing against his face like a farewell. The air smelled of memory, salt, old wood, and something bittersweet, like the scent of endings. For a moment he thought he heard Vivian's voice in the wind, whispering the words she could never say aloud. "Let it end with kindness." And that's exactly what he intended to do. He had inherited her estate, her secrets, her sins, but he refused to inherit her grief. Revenge would have been easy. Redemption required courage, and in that choice he found the truest form of love. Ethan sold the estate, not out of disdain, but liberation. The funds became a bridge between what was and what could be. With deliberate compassion, he founded the Whitmore Cole Foundation for Renewal and Inclusion. Its mission was simple, yet profound: to heal the wounds greed had carved into humanity. The first project built homes for families displaced by financial collapse. The next offered education to children silenced by poverty. Every initiative was an act of empathy, a quiet rebellion against the cruelty of indifference. When people asked him why he did it, he would simply smile and say, "Because forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's a decision we keep making, every single day." Years passed, and the foundation grew like a living symbol of transformation. In the main hall hung a mural, two hands intertwined, one painted in light, the other in shadow. Beneath it, in graceful lettering, were the words, "Hope is not inherited, it's created." Each visitor who crossed that threshold felt something unspoken, a connection that stretched beyond names and time. Ethan often walked through the corridors, speaking with volunteers, listening to stories that echoed his own. Every face he met, every tear he saw, became a fragment of his healing. Humanity, he realized, was not broken, only waiting to be understood. On the day of the Foundation's anniversary, sunlight spilled through the tall windows like a blessing. The crowd gathered silent but full of anticipation. Ethan took the stage, his voice steady but tender. "We are all born into stories we did not choose," he said. But it is through compassion that we learn to write new endings. Among the audience, an elderly woman raised her trembling hand, fingers forming the sign language for hope. Ethan paused, his eyes filling with tears. He smiled softly, recognizing that gesture, one Vivian once used in the quiet of the night when words were too heavy to speak. Forgiveness at last had come full circle. As evening fell, Ethan stood alone beneath the stars, the air filled with the laughter of children playing nearby. He closed his eyes and let the wind carry the sound, the kind of sound that makes you believe in new beginnings. He felt Vivian's presence, not haunting, but peaceful, her love now unbound by guilt. The ghosts had found rest, and so had he. For the first time, Ethan understood the paradox of life, that sometimes what we think is the end is actually inspiration being reborn. His legacy was no longer a curse, but a testament, proof that even the darkest inheritance can bloom into light when met with kindness. He looked to the horizon and whispered, "This is for you, for all of you." Then, quietly, almost as if answering himself, the wind replied with a single word that seemed to rise from every corner of the world: forgiveness. And in that sound, Ethan felt the weight of generations dissolve. What remained was pure hope, connection, and the infinite silence of peace. Maybe you've never signed a contract like Ethan S., but tell me honestly, how many times have you traded your peace for approval, your silence for belonging, your truth for fear? We all do it. That's the hidden deal of humanity, the one no one talks about. Yet, every day, we have the power to rewrite it. You don't need wealth to create transformation. You need kindness when it's hardest to give, compassion when it feels undeserved, and forgiveness even when you were the one betrayed. Ethan S.'s story reminds us that the past isn't a prison. It is a teacher. Each wound, each scar, each unspoken memory carries a lesson wrapped in pain. What matters is what we do with it. Will we repeat the cycle or break it with empathy? Will we let silence swallow our voice or use it to bring hope and inclusion to those still living in shadows? Because the truth is, your story has the power to heal someone else's, if you have the courage to share it. So before you go, answer me this. What's your contract of fate? What pain are you ready to transform into inspiration? If this story moved something inside you, even a little, then don't let it end here. Subscribe, turn on the notifications, and keep walking with me through these stories of love, humanity, and redemption. Because the more hearts we awaken, the closer we get to a world where silence finally becomes peace.